Thank you all for being here. This is part 3 of the parable series. It's the last part of the parable series, I guess, for now. As I mentioned previously, I want to thank Debbie for encouraging this particular topic, because it's put me for the past month in taking a sort of a systematic deep dive into the parables to kind of bring them in, see what themes are emerging, how they may be intersecting. They're not just separate little nuggets of wisdom and everything. They actually kind of weave together. And ultimately, what we've been talking about here over the course of the 3 weeks is cultivating the kingdom of heaven. And where is the kingdom of heaven? As we've asked each time around, it's within, right? So it's this whole process is about how can we use the parables in a very practical sense in our lives to help us cultivate something resembling the kingdom of heaven in the activity of our consciousness. Because whatever is going on in the activity of our consciousness, whether moving towards the kingdom of heaven or away from otherwise, right, is the only thing that we're really in control of. Like we have power to exert over what to say yes to in our lives and what to say no to in our lives. And by lives, I mean in the activity of our thinking and feeling nature. This is where we're co-creating that reality, which is Unity's third principle, right? We're co-creating this experience by the thoughts, the feelings that we are allowing to dominate in the activity of our thinking and feeling nature, in the activity of our consciousness. So in week 1, we looked at faith, that perceiving power that we have, that faculty that we have that allows us to perceive possibilities. And in this context, that possibility is that I could be transformed, as they say, by the renewing of my mind, by the renewing of my spirit. And so with my faith, I'm able to see that possibility. And in that week 1, we looked at those things where what are our talents? What are the seeds of creation that we've been given? How are we spending those talents? How are we sowing those seeds? We talked about, it doesn't benefit us to hide our light under a bushel basket, so to speak. Right. So we're bringing light into the situation with faith. Then we moved into the second week of the series. We took a closer look at our faculty for discernment, our faculty for wisdom, judgment. That word judgment is kind of a loaded kind of word because it can be misused and misunderstood. So I like the word discernment better, that we have this capacity, this faculty to discern, to sort out, to say yes, yes to that which is right and true, and no, no to that which is not beneficial to our experience. But we couple that power of judgment with our power of understanding, which is our intuitive sense. They're sort of twin powers, twin faculties working. That's the difference between our rational thinking in our head and our more intuitive feeling nature coming from our heart. So if we're going to be moving through this kingdom experience, we have to confront the idea of the divided kingdom. That's a big theme in all these parables, is that divided kingdom, that a kingdom that is divided against itself cannot what? It cannot stand, right? It's going to be in some lukewarm place, and it's neither all moving towards heaven or all moving otherwise. And it's just this lukewarm experience. So we have to discern, use our powers of judgment and discernment and everything to say what is right, what is true, what is going to facilitate my transformation, right? And so we looked at the powers of judgment through the parables of the speck, the log in the eye. Remember the log in the eye? Take the log out of your own eye first, then I can see more clearly. Take the speck out of yours. That it brings that onus of responsibility back to me to use my powers of judgment and discernment in the right way, right? And to refrain from that judgment. Today we're going to be moving into, in part 3 here, sort of the high level power that we're going to be looking at, weaving into our discussion, is the power of love. So we've looked at the power of faith. We've looked at the twin powers of judgment and understanding, where we're discerning and we're in that sort of middle ground. And today we're going to be completing our journey to where we're looking at cultivating the kingdom of heaven, which is actually within the activity of our consciousness. So the parables today are going to underscore those ideas. We're going to be going through 4 of them here today. We're just going to quickly name check each one to sort of cast our net for the day. But we're going to be looking at the parable of the kingdom of heaven, which is actually drawn from another name for this particular parable is the laborers in the vineyard. We're going to be talking about that and how divine equity shows up in the context of that story. And we're also going to be looking at the parable of y'all have heard the one, the old wine and new skins, right? We're going to be looking at that and how that affects our transformation, our ongoing transformation. And then we're also going to be looking at the parable of the heart of mankind, the heart of humankind, what that is made up of, and what signs we should actually look for to gauge and evaluate the heart of humankind, right? And then finally, we're going to land with the parable of the Good Samaritan at the end of this process. And the whole arc of today's progress is to tap into not only our power of love, which is going to be sort of like our underpinning, our foundational power of love, but also the effects and consequences of love in that right sense that lead to forgiveness and compassion, which it is said very explicitly and specifically, and I believe that it's true, that we cannot enter the kingdom of heaven without compassion. We cannot enter the kingdom of heaven without forgiveness. And I'm not just talking about forgiveness and compassion for others and of others. Most importantly, I'm talking about self-compassion, self-forgiveness. I don't know about y'all's experience. If y'all have a different experience, say so. But I've often found that it is much easier for me to forgive someone else, no matter how hard that is, than it is to actually forgive myself for my own shortcomings, for my own failings, the times that I acted irrationally or acted emotionally and out of whack, the times that I did not take action when I might have known that it was mine to take. So both those ways keep me in that sort of, I've been using this analogy of the Chinese finger trap here like the past few weeks. I just keep thinking about that Chinese finger trap. It's like, oh my God, release me from this, right? So it's the same kind of thing that we get ourselves into this box, so to speak, or I should say more than a box, a habit, a habitual pattern of showing up a certain way, how we show up in the world, how we express ourselves, because there is a continuity and a consistency, no matter what vibration we're kind of coming at it from. Once we create the habit of that vibration, we kind of are expressing in and around that. We might have better moments and some lower moments, but in general, we kind of coalesce around a kind of a vibrational polarity that we're running around expressing. And it's usually a mix of love and fear. It's, a mix of experience and memory, right? How do you think about your stories, right? How long have you been thinking about certain stories? And are those stories that we're affirming to ourselves, are they stories that are empowering us? Or are they stories that are shaming us? Are they stories where we're feeling guilt? Or are there stories where we're feeling healing? And it's probably a mix, but if we're honest with ourselves, it probably feels more normal to have the self-depreciating kinds of experiences where we're always talking ourselves down in the process, right? And so today's series of parables will help us to take a look at what that might look like in terms of cultivating the kingdom of heaven within the activity of our own thinking. And this is where we live, folks. Like we see each other, we connect once in a while, we see other people moving about the world, but actually you and I individually and collectively, we are living in this space right here in our heads. Whatever's going on in my head is my view of reality, and you can't express differently than what's going on in the activity of your thinking and feeling nature. You can change that. You can create a different habit or a different pattern, a different tendency, a different habit even, right? But in the beginning, to actually get on top of the ball, we have to be very proactive in our decision making, right? So the kingdom of heaven, let's take a look at how the kingdom of heaven is described. And the particular passage that I'm drawing from this morning for this is also called the laborers of the vineyard, okay? And what's going on here is there's a vineyard owner, right? So he shows up in the marketplace early in the morning looking for laborers to work the vineyard during the day. And some of them line up and he promises them each 1 denarius for their labors. And so he sends them off to go work in the fields. And then about 9 a.m. in the morning, he comes back into the marketplace and he sees some other folks standing around. He said, "What are y'all doing?" So "We're looking for work." He said, "Well, go over my vineyard and you can work there." And he sends those. And he does this throughout the day. He comes back at noon and finds another group of folks and sends them on to the vineyard. And 3 o'clock, at 5 o'clock, he comes back and there's still some folks standing around. He's like, what are y'all, why y'all been standing here all day? It's like, no one will hire us. He said, we'll go work in my vineyard. Right. So they finish up their work day. And as they finish up the work day, the vineyard owner calls for his foreman and says, gather up everybody and get them in line. And we're going to pay everybody. It's payday, right? Everybody likes payday, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to start with the ones who started last. We're going to pay the ones who started latest in the afternoon. We're going to pay them first. And so he goes up and he pays the one who came to work at 5 o'clock 1 denarius, which is the same thing he had promised the workers who began the day. So down the line, the workers are like, well, if he gave him 1 denarius, he was only here an hour, and he's going to pay us more. And he goes down, and in turn, he gives everyone 1 denarius, and some of the folks start grumbling. Well, why do we only get 1 denarius? Because that was the agreement. That was the agreement, right? And I can do with my money what I want. But underneath that, as we tease this out, what's really kind of going on here, the bottom line, the sort of punchline of that whole little parable, like the punchline of the joke, is, and y'all know this one, probably have heard this one, the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Have y'all heard that one before? The last shall be first, and the first shall be last. But what's really going on here is it really, if you look at it finally, it's really an expression of divine equity, isn't it? That everyone has access to the vineyard, and the vineyard is the same thing as the kingdom of heaven. It is the paradise in the vineyard, and here's this opportunity, and there's this exchange. I give you my labor and my time, and I'm compensated, I'm rewarded for that, and everyone is rewarded the same. It's kind of like a divine idea of equity and everything. So if we're going to be cultivating an expression of the kingdom of heaven, that divine equity's got to be kind of part of it. Well, that sounds good. It even sounds like political sloganeering just a little bit, right? I mean, we're used to this word equity. It gets bandied about, a whole lot. But really, where the equity comes in, it's up to me to create that consciousness within me to where I do actually perceive everyone as equal. And that gets hard. It gets hard when you're looking at the world and there seems to be so much inequality in the world. But this parable is reminding us that there is a divine equity in play, but that comes from me cultivating that sense of appreciation, not only for my part and being not content or settling for, but recognizing that the rewards I'm getting are equivalent to what I'm expressing and giving. Right? Aren't we taught that in our prosperity things? Like we give, we receive as we give. But the promise is actually that we receive as we give, but we receive 10 times and more, pressed down and overflowing. That the promise of the prosperity promise is that as we give, we're going to be taken care of. Our needs are going to be taken care of. And so we can move forward in spiritual confidence at that point in time. We don't have to feel that sense of need, that sense of lack. But we have to trust in it, right? And we have to perceive that that's actually what's going on in the divine reality, capital R. And we do that with the power of our faith. We perceive that that's really what's going on. And we keep our eyes, our hearts, our minds, our thoughts, our words, our actions attuned to that divine idea, that there is a divine equity in play. And that if I'm feeling lack, that the answer, the secret to that is for me to give more. Well, give from what? I can promise you, I had this thought this morning while I was sitting with all these notes and everything. I always have love to give, even if I don't have a penny in the bank, even if I don't know where my next meal is coming from. I still have love because I have an infinite capacity to express the energy of love. But I have to choose that. I have to allow that to express through me. The power of love, there's no timetable, there's no space, there's no separation between me and the divine creative energy and power of love. It's everywhere present, right? We affirm that all the time. We affirm it, but do you actually believe it? Do you actually remember it when you're having a moment of fear, when you're having a moment of self-judgment? Do you actually remember, oh, I'm in the midst of the power and the presence. Wherever I am, God is. And if God is love, then wherever I am, love is. And I don't have to get it. I don't have to go obtain it. It's already present. I just have to allow it. Right? So these are kind of turning some of these ideas upside down. That leads us into the parable of the old wine and new skins. And this is a really short one, so I'm just going to read it. It also unfolds another parable that's like it, which is the parable of the unshrunk cloth, the old, the new cloth on an old garment. It's tied into this new wine and old skin. So I'm going to read. This comes from Mark, but it's actually also present in Matthew. This is one of the parables that shows up in more than one gospel. Jesus just says, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. Otherwise, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. Y'all ever done that? Like, have you ever, like when I remember back in the 70s when you had my jeans and I get my little patches, and get a little tear thing, right? Get this brand new patch and you put it on there and wear it for a couple of months, and all of a sudden the tear starts coming out from underneath it. And then, like they said, it's a bigger hole than it was before. But so you gotta season that cloth, so to speak, to put it on. You can't put that unshrunk cloth on there. You can't put that sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's even like virgin cloth, so to speak. You have to have it paired up. Well, it's the same thing with the new wine and the old wineskins. That if I put the new wine in the old wineskins, it bursts the old wineskins. So we have to put the new wine in new wineskins so that they're both preserved. That's the point of this. It continues on. No one pours new wine into old wineskins, otherwise the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins are ruined and lost. Now I don't even have a wineskin, and my wine's all over the ground. No, we pour new wine into new wineskins. And that brings us back to that idea from Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your what? Of your mind. By the renewing of your mind. And we are doing that every day, whether we are conscious of it or unconscious of it. Whatever your habits are, if you're not feeling peace, then habitually you're probably choosing away from the energy of love. You're probably choosing the energy of fear. If your peace is disturbed for any reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is. Of course, the Miracles teaches us. If I'm not at peace for any reason, I've just simply chosen wrongly. I'm not seeing correctly. And if I want to restore my peace, I must choose again. That's what I love about Course in Miracles. It distills down to those two words. Choose again. Like after 670 pages of text, choose again. But it brings that power and that responsibility back to me. And that's what unit number 3 teaches us, doesn't it? That we are co-creating this experience. We are co-creating that. That's an active thing. I'm using my power to co-create this experience. By what? By the thoughts and the feelings that I am allowing in my consciousness. Am I allowing more love? Or I shouldn't say more love, because love is always maximal. Am I allowing love more of the time? Is a more appropriate way to put it. I don't need more love. I've got infinite capacity and unlimited capacity for love, but I am allowing it more of the time in my life. That's the answer. And so be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. So when you're thinking, as you're moving through the week this week in a very practical sense, I want you just to think about it once in a while. Like, notice whether you're choosing from love or from fear. Not to judge you or to shame you or anything, but just notice. Just notice. And as you're bouncing back and forth, because we choose both. We just do. It's just the way that it is. So there's no need to judge it. We just simply accept it as it is and then become conscious of it. Then I can be more proactive in making sure that I'm choosing love. And as I'm learning to express love more of the time, it may at first seem like effort, because I have to remind myself to do it, because I'm habitually getting my wheels in the ditch, right? Getting off track, right? So it feels like it takes work to do it, but it doesn't. It's the most natural thing in the world for us to choose it. We have to consciously do it until we're unconsciously doing it, until it becomes a habit. It becomes your default switch. If love is not your default switch already, like you're, check back in, recalibrate, got to go back to love. If that's not already in your tool belt, ready tool belt, It's probably the most important work you can do, is to make sure that love is your principal default position. So as we're moving forward, remember that new wine and new wine skins. So we're being transformed by the renewing of our mind. So as we're taking these new ideas in, they're not necessarily new to us. We've heard them before, but we need constant reminders, don't we? Mm-hmm. And we shouldn't feel bad about that. I always use the baseball analogy. I might have even used it here before. They're coming up on the last part of the season. They've been playing it too long. They've been injured. This, that, and the other, with playoffs ahead. Then the season's going to end, and they're going to take a few months off to heal and get ready for the next season. And then as soon as they come back to spring training, guess what they're doing? They're practicing fundamentals. They're hitting ground balls. They're throwing. They're running laps. They're doing all these high-paid players. Every year they get back to practicing the fundamentals until they're not even thinking about them anymore. Mm-hmm. And so they're having to constantly renew themselves and renew their commitment every year. Not only every year at the beginning of the year, but continue to do that through the course of the year if you're going to make it to the championship game. It's a constant renewing, isn't it? Like they have to let go of last night's loss. They have to let go of them striking out the last out of the game with the bases loaded. And they could have won the game, but they struck out. They got to like let that go, because it won't serve you the next day to carry that into the next day. So the heart of man, let's talk about the heart of man, the parable of the heart of man. What's going on here? Jesus is being grilled by the Pharisees and the scribes and everything. And what they're trying to trip him up with is that his guys aren't washing their hands the right way, in the ritualistic way of the Jewish people before they sit down and eat. And so the scribes and the Pharisees, they've got them just kind of trying to trap Jesus into this thing about we're unclean and we're not going through the ritual of cleaning ourselves before we eat. And Jesus tells them, this is one of my favorites, actually. It's really good. And Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. It is what comes out of a person that defiles them. That seems pretty straightforward. I can kind of resonate with that without much further explanation. Might need to tease out, well, what does he mean? Does it just literally mean the food that's going in my mouth? Or do we look at it from a metaphysical sense? The food is also the word, the sustenance, God's power. It's the substance that we're creating with. It's not just literally a bowl of food to eat. Metaphysically, it's that substance. Or the external events in the world. Y'all have heard the one, there's always be wars and rumors of wars, right? Y'all have heard that one before? There will always be wars and rumors of wars. Think about it for just a moment, you'll realize that's always been true. That's why it's the truth, capital T, because it's always been true. It's true right now. But those wars metaphysically are anything that would distract me from my peace. It's not just military conflict and social strife and economic stuff out here in the external world. It's anything that would rob me of my peace, my sense of identity, that I'm a child of God and have power. Anything that would cause me to doubt my divinity is a war, because it's attacking my peace. So it's not just the big things. We got to bring this in metaphysically deeper. So the heart of man, he had left the crowd, he entered the house, and the disciples, I don't know if y'all have read these recently or recall, but the disciples are pretty thick. Like Jesus is out here teaching and they're like getting it and seeing everybody excited, but they come back at night time and time again and like, Jesus, what did you mean? What did you mean? When you said that, what did you mean? And he's like, oh man, y'all are so dense. Let me break it down for you, a little further. And so that's what he does. He just literally, in this particular parable, he literally explicitly tells us what the meaning is. And so he says, don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them, for it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach and then out of the body. He went on, what comes out of a person is what defiles them, for it is from within, out of a person's heart, that the error comes. Right? So whatever happens in the world, it has no power unless I volunteer. Y'all know that's true about vampires too, right? But the vampire has no power over you unless you invite him in.
That's true.
He can stand there at your door, but until you invite him into the relationship, he has no power. And it's the same way with these things that sort of rob us of our energy and everything. I heard this back in the 90s in a personal growth weekend, you know, and it was kind of, I recognized its truth when I heard it, but it didn't make me feel comfortable, which was, there are no victims, there are only volunteers, right? That if we're in that victim dynamic in some way, we have agreed to play part in that. And in that recognition that I have volunteered for that, that's the first step in me gaining my power back. If I can get past being upset about it first, right? Oh my God, I've chosen that again. When am I ever going to learn? And use it as an excuse to shame myself even further. How to break that cycle. So that's what this heart of man is telling us, is that what's important is don't judge by the external things and what's coming in, because quite frankly, if we're moving through this world right now, there's so many things assaulting our consciousness. We are not in control of unless we just go off in a monastery somewhere and just completely unplug from the grid and everything, and just kind of get back to nature, as it were, and quietness. If you're moving through the world, there's going to be all kinds of things competing for your attention, competing for your peace all day long. It's relentless, right? So we're going to move into that reminder that it's not what's coming in. It's not what I'm exposed to, because we have a power of renunciation. Remember, that's one of our 12 powers. We have the power to say no. Oh no, I'm not allowing this into my habit of thinking, because I know from experience, in my wisdom, in my discernment, I know from experience, it's not going to bring me what I'm looking for. It's not going to bring me what I'm looking for. So I have to say no to that. And thank God I have a power to say no. How often do you exercise that power, folks? We usually say yes a lot of times. I know I'm totally guilty of it. Totally guilty, man. It's like my whole thing about service is always, I just say yes. I just say yes. That's been my default. In the last 2 or 3 years, I've had to learn to say no. And it felt weird at first. It felt like I was abandoning something. I was moving. I wasn't, doing what I was supposed to be doing. But as I've created that space in my own life and everything, it's created a space for new creativity, new expression, everything. Because that was what was always getting crowded out by saying yes to all the service requests. You only have so much creative energy and time and energy and all that. So if you're giving it all away in service and you're triaging your own creative self-expression in the process, you can do that for a little while, but it becomes untenable after a little while. But remember, we're supposed to give too. So it's a fine line. I mean, I'm just telling you, like literally living in that experience, it's a fine line to know what to say yes to and what to say no to. What is truly helpful to others and truly helpful to myself, you say yes to, right? But if there's going to be a depreciating aspect to some part of that relationship, we need to learn to discern to say no. So we're going to close with the parable of the Good Samaritan here today. And this kind of brings it all the way back to, once again, back to us, back to individual action. That if we're going to cultivate the kingdom of heaven within the activity of our own thinking and our own consciousness, then we have to assume responsibility. That's the first step, right? Assume personal responsibility for the quality of your experience. You can make that decision today. You may have already made that decision in your life, and just coming to church and to groups and things like that is a way that you're continuing to affirm that. Because we are recidivists. we will slide backwards if we don't keep our attention up. Because sometimes it just feels good just to be lazy, doesn't it? Take the day off, give ourselves a hall pass for the day. It feels good sometimes, okay? And it's okay. Don't judge yourself when you do, but don't make that a habit either, right? Because it will backfire on us. So in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the easy way to sum this up, this is the love God and love your neighbor idea, what's going on here. And ultimately, it's leading us to this place of compassion. I mentioned compassion up front. before we get to the parable here, I want to make one point. Our power today is power of love. Okay. Charles called the power of love the harmonizing power. Like when we bring love into any circumstance, any relationship, any situation, and everything, no matter what the discord is, when we truly allow love to come in, it harmonizes all the discord. It puts everything into alignment because love is our true nature. We're coming from our divinity. We're coming from our divine power when we're coming from love. The effects and consequences of that show up in the willingness to forgive, compassion, and even our peace. Peace is the result, the effect, the consequence of choosing. It's not a separate thing on the menu item. I'll have some peace and some shame today, and give me a little neutrality, please. Yeah, give me some neutrality as well while we're at it. It's not a menu item. It's the effect and consequence. The only choice we're making is love and fear. That's the only one we're making. In a spiritual sense, we are choosing between love and fear over and over and over. And so here's some different questions. This particular parable teaches us that, right? So I'm going to read it because it's a nice little story and to refresh ourselves. So on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to Jesus and he said, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus asked him, "What is written in the law?" And he replied, "How do you read it?" And the man answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." We've all heard that before, right? This is somebody responding to Jesus. It's not Jesus actually saying it right now. And Jesus tells him, number one answer, ding, 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 right? You have answered correctly. Do this and you will live. But then the man's getting a little cocky about it, right? And he says, so he asked Jesus, well, who is my neighbor? So this parable of the Good Samaritan is Jesus' response to this question, who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side of the road. So too a Levite, now a Levite is like their lawyers. A Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, he also passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. So Jesus then asked the question, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? That's pretty plain, right? Anybody got another answer besides the Good Samaritan? Anybody got another answer? We can talk about that. But it's the Good Samaritan, right? Now the Samaritans were sort of outside of the law. They were sort of moderate Jewish. They had some other things. And so the Pharisees and the established order at that point in time didn't recognize the Samaritans as really being part of Jewish culture. So they were just kind of out here in the hinterlands a little bit, right? But yet he was the one that actually who responded and was faithful to that idea of love your neighbor, right? Had compassion for that person. My belief is that my ability to have compassion for others is directly relative to my ability to have self-compassion for my own self. That I can't give more compassion than I have a reservoir for. And the way that I fill up my reservoir is by being loving, being forgiving, being compassionate with myself, and then modeling, expressing that. Because I have way more opportunities during the course of a day to practice compassion with myself than with others. And so if I'm going to flex my muscles, if I'm going to get in condition, I must cultivate the kingdom of heaven within. And that's ultimately what we've been talking about here for 3 weeks. Is what can we do? What should we do? What is helpful to me in cultivating the kingdom of heaven in my own skin and the activity of my own thinking. There's all manner of aid out there for us. There's all manner of truth. You have unlimited creative power. You have an unlimited capacity to express love to yourself and to others. These are not in limited quantities. The only thing that's limited is how often are we exercising it? How often are we expressing it? Because love is always ready, folks. Love is moving around right now, looking for willing vessels to express through. If you don't think you have anything, you have infinite love, and you have it eternally. When we own that, when we take responsibility for that, that's the beginning of everything. That's the beginning of everything. So as we close here and get ourselves ready for a little meditation, to take that a little deeper and everything, I want to just kind of invite you all right now just to maybe just shake off everything that I just said. I know there was a lot of information that was just, just expressed, and your mind may be pinging around with different ideas right now, but just for the next few minutes, start with just taking a deep centering breath or two or three, whatever it takes for you to feel anchored in your chair. Sharon's going to play a little interlude music, a little prelude music for us here to set the stage. And as we breathe, get to that place of neutrality and consciousness.
Let us find peace. Let us find love. Let us now quiet the mind and rise above. We can find joy in the knowing we have all we need. Let loving spirit set you free.
Let loving spirit set you free. Right here, right now, in the silence. As we begin to gently draw our attention back into this space, back into this sacred space, we do so in the awareness that wherever we are, God is. Wherever we are, love is. Wherever we are, truth is. All of it available to us. We are grateful for Jesus and the lessons that he expressed in his lifetime. We are grateful for these parables that we've been taking a closer look at over the last 3 weeks. We know that they will continue to work on the activity of our thinking, our feeling, and our words and our expressions. We open ourselves up to learn deeper and deeper lessons from these great teachings that have come down for more than 2,000 years now. We're so grateful for this community here at Unity in the heart of Austin, and for the consciousness that is being transformed even now. We accept our part in this community. We accept our responsibility to be good Samaritans, good stewards of God's love. And we know that as we give, so do we receive. We're so ever grateful for that law of circulation, that law of prosperity. We say thank you for these lessons. Thank you for this time that we've had together to share these and to go deeper. We invite Spirit to keep working on us. Keep working on us. Keep showing insights. Keep bringing inspiration. Keep bringing opportunities to serve to us. And we will say yes. We say yes to the renewal of our mind, to the transformation of our spirit. We look forward to the expression of love, compassion, forgiveness. Most of all, we look forward to the experience of peace. So once again, we say thank you, living, loving Spirit. We pray all of this and more in the name and the nature of the indwelling Christ. And so it is. So we allow it to be. Amen.
And this is several ways that you can help our community thrive. You can text G2UHA to the number 44321. Give at unityheartofaustin.com at the donate button on the website, or you can mail a check to Unity Heart of Austin, and the address is there on the page.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. God surrounds us, the love of God upholds us, the power of God protects us, the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.